received the results from all constituencies, and so I will now make the declaration, and I'll do so in Irish and in English. I've been notified by the local returning officers of the results in each constituency. The provisional result of the referendum held yesterday on the proposal in the 36th Amendment of the Constitution Bill 2018 is as follows.
Any decision on whether or not to amend the Constitution is an important part of Ireland's democratic process, one that involves a lot of work to ensure that every vote counts. The Constitution, or Bunreacht na hÉireann, is the fundamental legal document in Ireland. It outlines the state's main institutions and the rights of citizens. Article 46 explains how the Constitution can be changed. There are two types of referendum possible in Ireland, a constitutional referendum or an ordinary referendum. A constitutional referendum is one to amend the Constitution. An ordinary referendum is one in which the President has decided that the will of the people should be sought on a piece of legislation of major national importance. He or she can only decide to call such a referendum after receiving a joint petition from a majority of the members of the Seanad and at least 1/3 of all members, and after consulting the Council of State. Ireland's first referendum was in 1959. We have had constitutional referendums in Ireland on issues such as the European Union, social issues such as marriage and human rights, and institutions of state such as the courts and the Seanad. The Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government and his department are responsible for organising referendums.
The first step in holding of any referendum is that the Minister responsible for the policy area will prepare and bring forward a constitutional amendment bill. That bill contains the proposal to amend the Constitution. When that's published, the Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government is then in a position to establish a referendum commission. That's the commission that provides information to the voters on what the referendum is about. The bill then passes through both houses, the Oireachtas, the Dáil and the Seanad, and when the bill finally passes both houses, the Minister for Housing, Planning and Local Government again makes a further order. That's the polling day order. That sets the polling day and also sets out the times that the polls will be open on referendum day.
An important part of any referendum campaign is access to fair, impartial information. The Referendum Commission provides this. A new commission is established for each referendum. The commission has 5 members. A former or sitting High Court judge or a former Supreme Court judge, the Ombudsman, the Comptroller and Auditor General, the Clerk of the Dáil and the Clerk of the Seanad. The Office of the Ombudsman provides it with administrative support. The Commission provides the public with information on issues through its website www.refcom.ie, an information booklet to every household, interviews with the media to answer questions on the issues. It also promotes public awareness of the campaign and encourages the electorate to vote in the referendum.
People can get information on the content of the referendum from the returning officer's website, which is at referendum.ie. And on that website, you'll typically find historical information about past referendums, the results, the content, the issues, and you'll also find details on the current referendum, so the constitutional amendment bill that's currently at issue, and you'll find a statement for the information of voters. And then crucially also you will, on count day, you'll find the results of the referendum as they come in at constituency level, and then obviously the overall national results. That's on referendum.ie.
Transparency and impartiality are important elements of the process. For example, there are laws about donations to political parties or political organisations campaigning in a referendum. Issues such as posters are regulated by law. Certain persons are allowed to monitor voting or the counting of votes. No state money can be used to promote either side of the debate. The Department of Housing, Planning and Local Government, the local returning officers who are responsible for the running of a referendum at constituency level, local authorities and other public bodies like the Office of Public Works work together to organise polling day and the counting of votes.
When the polling day order signs, that's when things spring into action. So you can start notifying your schools and halls that you have polling stations in. You can then start engaging your staff. We ask the presiding officers to do online training, and if they have that completed successfully, we then appoint the staff. For new presiding officers, we undertake training in person. So the polling staff are appointed first, presiding officers and poll clerks. We then move on to the count staff. Before every event, once the polling day order is signed, we request the amount of stationery we're going to need to run the referendum efficiently. Well, in terms of polling station equipment, like the polling booths, we would have those ourselves and we would keep those in a warehouse. Same with the polling boxes. And like the stamping instruments, the stationery, of which there's an awful lot, like pencils, sharpeners, rulers, thumbtacks, blue tack, they're all issued to us by the Office of Public Works.
Any Irish citizen aged 18 or over and normally resident in Ireland is entitled to vote in a referendum. Certain citizens can participate through postal voting or special voting.
There is postal voting available for certain categories of voters. So for example, diplomats who are stationed abroad, the defence forces who are abroad, and students may also avail of a postal vote along with Gardaí, or people, for example, who can't be at their polling station on the day due to work reasons. Special voters can vote in nursing homes or hospitals and so on, where they're long stay patients. Special presiding officer will go to those people who are identified on the register as special voters, and they'll vote in that way.
As well as checking before referendum day if they are on the electoral register, voters should bring valid ID to the polling station. Examples of valid ID are given on the polling card. Polling stations are normally open between 7 a.m. and 10 p.m. on polling day. A presiding officer is responsible for running the referendum at a polling station.
For the presiding officer, we may be taking delivery of the boxes on the morning, so that means you could be in before 6, otherwise you might be here for 6:30. And then we set up, so that's involved in making sure that the box is opened and emptied with all the various bits and pieces, make sure things are here, your key things like the stamp, the register and the ballot papers. Then throughout the day then you're working with your poll clerk, and if there's other presiding officers and poll clerks, you're working with them as needs be as well, so to make sure that people get to vote, that everybody who's eligible to vote is able to vote. And if there's difficulties or challenges in that, sometimes maybe that people maybe are in the wrong place, they might, there might be something about it that you need to check, so you might have to check back with head office to make sure everything's okay. In 2018 there has been the development, which is a great development I think, in terms of increasing equality and making sure that people do have access to the right to vote, and that independent piece of it. The introduction of a device that's for blind or partially sighted voters. So this is the device here. So there's a TA and a yes and a nil and a no, and then there's also the braille in here, and then there's 2 boxes. So a person who's visually impaired to be able to use this themselves, to be able to use the braille to identify whether they're going for the yes or the no.
Media coverage of a referendum campaign and the results is an important part of the democratic process.
In the run-up to the referendum, our main role, I suppose, is in relation to supporting the referendum returning officer and dealing with any media queries in relation to, in advance of the referendum, really what might happen on the day, what goes on during the day, when the results might be announced, those kind of timing issues. And that would involve us going over to Dublin Castle to make the necessary arrangements in relation to the facilities we need, broadband, telephones, food and beverages, those kind of issues.
On the day of the count, each constituency's votes are counted separately. The process is overseen by the local returning officer.
In respect of the count here in Dublin City, I'm responsible for 5 constituencies. We opened the doors approximately 7:30 this morning. I did a security sweep. We had Gardaí present overnight, as well as a dog unit, and everything was in order. So I gave the order to open the doors to let the media in. Then the tally persons came in. We have 21 approved bodies, so we were expecting approximately 1,800 tally people to be here. And we've set it up that there are adequate space for the tally people, that they can monitor each pair of counters as they open the box. So at 9 o'clock, we broke the locks on the boxes, and the boxes were then distributed out to the various counters. Initially, the papers are opened with face up, So the tally people are facilitated so they can see very quickly and clearly how the preferences of the voters are. Ballot papers are then balanced with the ballot paper accounts, which were signed off by the presiding officer in the polling station, and we do a complete reconciliation of that. And we don't proceed any further until that reconciliation is completed and is 100% accurate. That's the process here, and we then proceed with the actual count, and we bundle the papers in accordance to the preferences in hundreds. I'm obliged to send the information to Dublin Castle, to the National Referendum Returning Officer in Dublin Castle before I publish.
At the National Count Centre, the Referendum Returning Officer and the officer's staff compile the results from all the local returning officers to calculate the national result. Local returning officers are also allowed to appoint a legal advisor in case of any disputes or concerns about the counting of votes.
The critical thing always in general elections, and obviously referenda too, is to generate confidence in what's going on, to demonstrate you know what's going on, you know their concern, because there's a high emotional overlay.
On the day of the results, the press office are based in Dublin Castle. We operate the media centre from early in the morning until late in the evening, and late in the evening means until the final result has been announced. So we deal with media who've been accredited in advance and who arrive on the day to make sure that they get the facilities they need and that there's no difficulties. Years ago we would have had our results announced here in the Custom House because there wasn't a huge interest in relation to attendance, but in recent years that interest has ramped up massively. So we've tended to use Dublin Castle now because it's probably one of the only venues in the city centre that can accommodate a large number of journalists from nationally and abroad.
The national result of a referendum is declared by the Referendum Returning Officer. Certain steps must be taken before a referendum result is confirmed. The Referendum Returning Officer signs and publishes a provisional referendum certificate. Anyone on the Register of Electors for a referendum has 7 days to apply to the High Court to challenge the result. If the application is granted, the High Court hears the appeal. If any appeal is unsuccessful, the provisional referendum result becomes final. Once any appeals are concluded, the Referendum Returning Officer notifies the President and the Taoiseach of the final result. If the proposal is approved by the people, the President then signs the Constitution Amendment Bill into law and the Constitution is amended. Any decision on whether or not to amend the Constitution is yours.
Total number of votes in favour of the proposal, 818,112.
Votes in favour of the proposal, 1,201,607.
Majority of votes in favour of the proposal, 706,349.
Every effort is made to make sure you can have your say.